Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everyone. Nous sommes le 12 novembre 2020. Mon nom est Julie Payette et je suis la gouverneure générale du Canada. Cette semaine est une semaine très importante pour nous tous. C'est la semaine du jour du souvenir. C'est la semaine où on se rappelle, où nous rendons hommage à tous ceux qui ont péri pour défendre nos valeurs, à nos valeureux vétérans et aux hommes et aux femmes qui servent notre pays en uniforme. Jusqu'à la cérémonie du 11 novembre, nous portons fièrement le coquelicot pour nous rappeler que la paix et la liberté ont un prix et pour montrer que notre reconnaissance et ne jamais oublier leur sacrifice. In this week of remembrance, we remember the fallen, we pay tribute to our veterans, and we show the gratitude of a nation. Because we remember that peace and liberty have a price, and that those men and women who fight for our country in uniform are there to preserve those values. Today, we have a very special program for you, and we are very honored to have as our first guest someone very special, Madame Debbie Sullivan. She is the Silver Cross Mother, la Mère à la Croix d'Argent. She will explain to us exactly what this means. But Miss Debbie Sullivan is really the true example of what a military woman and a military mother is. She herself has served in the reserves in the 90s, and she was married to an artillery soldier. But before we speak to Madame Sullivan, I have a little anecdote here because I was, after yesterday's ceremony, talking to a friend of mine who serves at the Borden Canadian Air Force Base. And she wrote about Madame Sullivan because Madame Sullivan made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. She gave up her son, Christopher Saunders, who perished in a fire aboard the HMCS Chicoutimi in 2004. We'll come back on this. So my friend, who is an aviator from Borden, wrote about Madame Sullivan, that she heard her speak yesterday on television, that she was so well-spoken and so fiercely proud of her son and her grandsons, who were very young when Christopher Saunders perished. They were really small at the time when their dad passed away. My friend says about Madame Sullivan, she focused the discussion on her son and her daughter, but meanwhile, she has some pretty impressive time in uniform herself, first as a Sea Cadet, then as an Army reservist. She is an inspiration and an amazing example of grace in the face of adversity. What a great choice to be this year's Silver Cross Mother. I couldn't agree more. Welcome, Miss Debbie Sullivan.
Your Excellency, thank you for having me.
First question for you, Miss Sullivan. What is a Silver Cross Mother and why is it important for Canada?
The Silver Cross Mother is the person chosen by the Legion to represent all mothers who have lost their son or daughter while serving for our country. And what it means is I get the distinction of being there representing all of them at any function that goes on throughout the year that honors our fallen. So it's quite an honor.
And it means, and this tradition dates back several decades, just after or around the Second World War. And every year there is a different Silver Cross Mother that represents all of those families and family members who grieve the loss of a service member. But for you, it is particularly special because you're also really part of a military family. Tell us about your family and tell us about Christopher.
Well, I had an uncle and my father were in the military. My uncle was in the Navy and my father was in the Air Force. So they served, and I myself served in the reserves. And my husband Stuart is a former artilleryman with two. I'm going to say it wrong. 2 RHR, maybe. I may have that wrong, but he served under Pierre Elliott Trudeau. So it was there is the background there, and I know further back in my history, I know that there are others. I can't name them all right now, but there were others in the military as well.
And Christopher was a submariner, a very proud service within the Royal Navy of Canada. Tell us about Christopher.
Well, Christopher was a very organized little boy. I think he was destined for the military even as a young boy, because he was a person who loved order in everything he did. Even his toys lined up against the wall from biggest to smallest. Everything had a place and everything was in its place. And that's the way he liked it. And when he grew older, I always asked him what he wanted to do when he grew up. And he said he wanted to do something in service, but he wasn't sure what that was. But when he was in high school, he got interested in the Army Reserves, and he wanted to join the Army Reserves, which he did in high school because he wanted the adventure. He was an adventurer. He was a daredevil, and he wanted to give something like that a try. Plus, I reminded him of the fact that, you know, even though he didn't follow orders from mom, that he was going to have to follow orders if he joined the military. And he said, yes, he knew that. He understood that. And he did join the Army Reserves, and that's what he had chosen. But he decided that he wanted to be a combat systems engineer. And during his term in the reserves, he won a scholarship to military college in Saint-Jean, Quebec, military college, in Saint-Jean, Quebec. And he switched to Navy because that is what was going to get him the courses that he wanted to be a combat systems engineer. So he joined the Navy, and he served on several ships while he was stationed in Halifax. And one day they were taken on a tour of the submarines, and he stepped inside the submarine and he said, this is it. This is what I want to do. And he worked his way into becoming a submariner, and a proud one he was as well.
And a very gifted one as well. It is a great loss to our country, Madame, and you know how we feel. But yesterday we were at the remembrance ceremony in Ottawa at the Cenotaph, you and I and the Vice Regal Party, and you put out a wreath for all the fallen and all the families who are grieving. How was that experience, and how did you feel? I know we connected just a little bit before.
It was emotional. It was emotional. While the ceremony was going on, I was saying my prayers for all the veterans and saying the prayers for my son. And it was very emotional, but I did it with pride and I did it with honor.
And you did it with such poise and continence, Madame.
Thank you.
We're all in admiration. Miss Debbie Sullivan grew up in the countryside near St. John, New Brunswick. She represents us in an extraordinary manner, but most importantly as the Silver Cross Mother, la mère à la croix d'argent. Elle représente toutes les familles qui ont eu à perdre une personne en uniforme, que ce soit en action dans un théâtre comme dans les guerres ou les conflits, mais aussi lors d'entraînements ou lors d'accidents comme ça a été le cas pour le sous-marin. Madame Sullivan, we cannot be more proud and gratitude, because what message you give out there to everyone who grieves is that they are not alone. Merci.
No, they're not. Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency.
All the best.
Thank you.
Every year on Remembrance Day, we pause to honor the sacrifice, the courage, and the extraordinary service of our veterans. We pause to say thank you for what they have done for our country and for what they still do. 75 ans ont passé depuis la fin de la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Nos vétérans y ont gagné de nombreuses batailles au prix d'immenses sacrifices. Plus de 43 000 Canadiens ont péri, et encore plus nombreux sont les hommes qui sont revenus à la maison blessés et meurtris de cicatrices psychologiques que ces années de conflit leur ont infligées et dont on parlait peu à l'époque.
Je suis content d'avoir traversé ce que j'ai traversé, parce que j'en ai plusieurs que J'ai laissé comme à Caen. À Caen, surtout, on a perdu plusieurs compagnons. Et puis, on pense à eux souvent. You remain friends for life. They're like family. I attended every one of their funerals from New Brunswick to Vancouver. We got to know their families and they got to know ours.
I discovered then that we are all the same. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You laugh over the same things. You cry over the same things.
It is something that you get used to, your friends dying and acquaintances getting killed in some way very horribly.
Oui, j'avais seulement 17 ans quand je me suis enrôlé. J'ai fait passer, mais j'ai fait passer pour 19. À 17 ans, on ne pense pas au danger, on ne pense pas à grand-chose. On avait 20 tonnes d'explosifs dans l'avion. Notre avion était frappé, puis après ça, il a tombé en feu. C'est là que j'ai perdu ma jambe. Les décisions, c'était toujours, mais j'ai fait mon possible à le moment. Mais c'est tout ce qu'on peut faire. Hein?
I was acting platoon commander. So I was just a kid myself, really. All of a sudden, I look around and there's all these little kids. They'd have been hidden for years because if the Germans had found them, they would have punished them. But to look around and all these smiling kids, it was just one of the best days of the war for me.
We're called the Caring Canadians. I think that's a wonderful legacy to have. I have found it to be so true.
Sometimes I was so frightened that I could hardly see sometimes. I don't know what courage is really. It's being scared and yet doing your job, even when you're afraid.
Non, on ne pensait pas d'être un héros, de faire le héros. C'était un peu l'aventure. We're fortunate to be Canadians, and I don't think that we realize it. We take it for granted. Meilleur pays du monde. Et ça vaut tout ce qu'on peut faire pour le protéger.
So over the years, we have told our story. And I think Canada does very well in commemorating the World War II. And I never miss a Remembrance Day service. And I always march.
Nous nous souvenons d'eux. We remember them. Today and always. Today and always. Maintenant et pour toujours, nous nous souvenons d'eux. J'espère que vous avez eu comme moi les émotions à écouter les paroles de nos vétérans. Nous devons les écouter, raconter leur histoire et nous rappeler les leçons de la guerre. Car cette année est le 75e anniversaire de la fin de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. It is an important milestone. 75 years ago, we finally put an end at one of the worst conflicts that this planet has ever seen, the Second World War. And for this, we need to remember and we need to listen to people who were there, tell their story and give us the lessons not to forget that we need to push into the future, educate our young people so that we never forget the terrible costs of war. But to talk about what happened in those times, we are so very blessed today to have an extraordinary veteran, Major General Romer. Major General Romer is a decorated veteran of the Second World War with decades of service to the Canadian Forces. He served with the Royal Canadian Air Force as a fighter reconnaissance pilot from 1942 to 1945, which means that he probably dodged more aircraft of all kinds than almost anybody in the country. He took part in the D-Day operations, among many others military feats. He is a World War II ace pilot. He is currently still serving as the honorary Lieutenant General of the Canadian Armed Forces, and he is an award-winning author and an officer of the Order of Canada. I was very privileged to have the chance to walk on the sand of the Juno Beach last year with Major General Romer, and today he gives us the immense honor to speak to us at the GG Conversation. Welcome, Major General Romer.
Thank you, Your Excellency. The honor is on my side to be able to be in your presence, even though it is by remote. But being with you on the beaches that took the Queen's Own Rifles on D-Day, over which I was flying at the time, was a great privilege. And it lives very deeply in my memory bank. And I have a picture of the two of us together, which I treasured. There are other pictures that I haven't taken yet, I hope.
Well, this picture was because we needed to commemorate what happened on that very beach on the 6th of June, 1944. But you were in the air. Yes. And then you continued on until the battle and the liberation of Holland. Tell us how it was. Was it really scary?
Well, it was really scary from my point of view, because as a reconnaissance pilot, I was flying a Mustang fighter, but I was there not to shoot other airplanes down, but to do reconnaissance, to see what the enemy was doing, where his tanks might be, and whatever the army wanted to know about the enemy opposite them, we could go and photograph. So that was my fundamental role as a fighter reconnaissance pilot, and it took me from Normandy, where I did a whole group of operations, up through Belgium and into Holland for quite a time. And then when that was finished, I knocked the bridges down at a town called, well, the town I won't give you, it's a secret. It's called Venlo on the Maas River. So it was a long tour of a year and a half, and I think fairly successful. I was shot at on every operation and hit only once. So here I am.
And at the time, of course, you know, most people now who are relying on phones and GPS and, you know, to navigate on anything. And there certainly was not as much light because it was a war zone. How did you, I mean, did you do most of your reconnaissance mission during the night or the day? And how did you navigate?
They were all done daylight because we didn't have any equipment that could see at night. So we had to operate on the day. As soon as it was dawn, we would be airborne with missions to perform. And we would be out for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I would be leading a formation of 2 or 4, and at low level. We had to be, we couldn't be up very high. Couldn't be up at 10,000 feet or 5,000 feet. We had to be down low. And that made us very easy targets for the enemy. They loved shooting at us, and we could see the stuff coming. But every one of my missions, I did 135 of them. There's a record of flak. That was what they were firing at us, the enemy anti-aircraft weaponry. So it was a happy time. I survived.
How old were you, General Romer?
At that point, I started off on the squadron at 19, and I did most of my flying on 430 Squadron when I was 20, and I finished my tour at 20.
You see, we say that youth are not afraid of danger, and perhaps there was a sense that you could, accurately see what you needed to see and then dodge the enemy fire. But still, you probably also had suffered a lot of losses. That is why you've always been very involved in all of Remembrance Day ceremonies and commemoration, because of all the people who have given their lives so that we can enjoy our freedom today.
Well, quite a few, that's for sure. It was a very dangerous operation, and to be 20 years old was exactly the right age. I can tell you that.
We have had these ceremonies, but we of course now know that it's been 75 years ago now that the end of the Second World War. There is no more veterans from the First World War, the Great War, but we need to make sure that the young people carry the devoir de mémoire, this duty to remember forever. What would you say to the young people about your experience, but also about the wisdom that you've developed over, a few decades?
We can't talk about wisdom in a vacuum. That's the problem with it. The reality of that question is a strong one, and it's very difficult because the world has changed so much. Over every 10 years, the world is different than it was 10 years before. We have people coming to this country. We're going to take 400,000 this year. Kind of think that will be a great addition to it. But how do we tell them, and how do we tell our young people about the wars that we have fought and the people we have lying in by the thousands in Europe as a result of the war? We just have to have the opportunity to have parades, the opportunity to tell stories such as you are doing now, kind of thing. But to keep the communication up, to let the public know, generally speaking, that we have fought wars and they have been successful and they have been costly, and wars are foolish beyond measure. But in any event, it's up to our government to lead in terms of providing the example of celebrations. And yesterday was an example where, from my point of view, you did a fantastic job. There was a good ceremony in Ottawa, in Ontario, where I had built the Veterans Memorial Wall at Queen's Park. I wasn't even invited. Just incredible.
Pandemic is wreaking havoc everywhere in the country.
The Premier, who's a friend of mine, will hear about it definitely and at length. Shouldn't happen again. But the reality is, it's up to each generation to take the memories of the warfare that was fought and the impact on the people of that time and on the young people then. It's still all there, but the world is totally different now, and we have to keep repeating it.
It is, but the military, the aspects of defense, the aspect of being present within the community is still just as important today. Our forces have, we don't have participation in big, great war conflict, thank Lord. But we have, we're defending, we are collaborating with partners, we are capacity building, teaching, supporting, and maintaining peace. So what would you say to young people about a military career? You enlisted very young.
Yeah.
What would you say to encourage them to contemplate a military
career?
Well,
I would encourage them, to young people, saying that it is essential to the nation that we keep our strength, military strength, up so that we can defend ourselves and not depend totally on other nations to defend us. But the reality is, and I'm going to jump off a cliff here, but the reality is there's not much support in the House of Commons. I don't go into parties, but House of Commons for military. We're looking at the requirement of a new fighter aircraft, and that is gaining all kinds of difficulty. we've waited 10 years for a new airplane and there'd still be no decision.
But I think, though, that nowadays, as you know, with the technology advances, there's a lot of new trades and new profession within the military, counterintelligence, all the aspects of informatics and computer science, cybersecurity, cyber warfare. It's expanding into realms that are not the typical way maybe we've been fighting in the past, but it's just as damageable to our society. So, sir, I cannot agree more. The men and women who serve in uniform for our country are more important than ever. And you are a beacon and an example that so many can follow. One last question. Of course, how have you been with this pandemic that has swept around the entire planet?
All right. How have I been? I have located in a place called Collingwood. I've been here for many years. My law practice, I practice law. I gave up in December after 70 years of it. I did the approvals for the CN Tower and all kinds of things in my time. But the reality is not much is going on in terms of progress that I would like to see. But in terms of being alive in this place is a great benefit and boon for me, and being part of the military as the Honorary Lieutenant General of the Canadian Forces. It gives me a complete tie to reality where I can learn and also influence the course of events. That's what I've always tried to do.
And sir, thank you for your continuing service to Canada. And you're right, with the pandemic, it has changed things. People have had to make sacrifice. You know, there are some similarities perhaps with theaters of conflict. But one thing is sure is that we understand that virus better. We know how to treat it a little bit better, and a vaccine is coming within the next few months. But until then, we have to be disciplined like you were when you were a reconnaissance pilot in World War II, and to stay vigilant all the time until we can fight it off completely.
I shall follow your orders, Commander-in-Chief, and be vigilant.
Follow the public health measure, and then make sure that you stay distant. Sir, it was an absolute pleasure. I have to say to the people who are listening to us that when we walked on the morning of the 6th of June, 2019, 75 years after D-Day, you were supporting me on the SAM, not the opposite.
Oh, no, I say it was the opposite. You did a great job keeping me erect. So a fan of yours, and you did such a good job in Ottawa yesterday. You had everything nailed beautifully. Congratulations, and you look wonderful. So there you are.
And it's very important. So we bid you goodbye, stay healthy, all the best. And in the meantime, for our viewers, we will show you what happened yesterday in Ottawa for the Remembrance Day. Nous allons vous montrer un petit vidéo de qu'est-ce qui s'est passé hier en la journée du souvenir, le 11 novembre 2020 à Ottawa. Et au moment où nous avons le plus grand silence, c'était lors de la 11e minute de la 11e heure du 11e mois.
Thank you.